Some stories make you question everything. A 20-year-old American college sophomore is excited for a big party at a friend's off-campus house. Music, friends, laughter. It's supposed to be a fun night. But after a few drinks, she steps outside for fresh air. What if that single decision led to one of the darkest nights of her life? Abduction, torture, and a terrifying fight to survive. How quickly can a normal college night turn into pure evil? Stay with me until the end. This true horror story is absolutely shocking. Her name was Emily Carter. In the fall of 2019, at a university in Pennsylvania, Emily was a popular sophomore majoring in psychology. That Saturday night, she went to a big off-campus party with her roommates. The house was packed, loud music, red cups, everyone having fun. Emily danced, laughed, and had a couple of drinks. Around 1 a.m., she stepped out into the backyard for some fresh air because the house felt too hot and crowded. That's when everything changed. A man who had been watching her inside the party followed her out. He was in his late 20s, pretending to be a graduate student. Before Emily could react, he grabbed her from behind, pressed a cloth soaked in chemicals over her mouth, and dragged her toward a waiting van parked on the side street. The party was so loud that no one heard her muffled screams. Within seconds, she was gone. The man took Emily to a secluded cabin about an hour outside the city. It was a rundown hunting cabin with no neighbors for miles. From the moment they arrived, the horror began. He tied her to a bed and raped her repeatedly. He beat her when she cried or tried to resist. He told her he had been planning this for weeks after seeing her on campus. The next several days became a living hell. He kept her locked in the cabin, chained most of the time. He tortured her physically, whipping her, burning her with hot tools, and cutting her. He starved her for long periods and only gave her small amounts of food when he felt like it. The psychological abuse was equally cruel. He forced her to listen to news reports about her own disappearance and mocked her while her family pleaded on television for her safe return. Emily was completely isolated. She had no idea if anyone was looking for her properly. She kept herself mentally alive by remembering her family, her little brother, and her dreams of becoming a therapist. She scratched small marks on the wooden floor every day to track time. After nearly 2 weeks of constant torture, the man made a mistake. He had to leave the cabin for several hours to get supplies. Before leaving, he tied her more loosely than usual because he thought she was too weak to fight. That was Emily's only chance. Using every bit of strength she had left, she managed to free one hand. It took her almost an hour of painful struggling, but she finally got loose. Her body was weak and covered in injuries, but adrenaline took over. She found a kitchen knife and broke a window to escape. Glass cut her arms badly, but she ran into the dense forest surrounding the cabin. The man returned sooner than expected and discovered she was gone. He chased her into the woods with a gun. Emily could hear him shouting and crashing through the trees behind her. She ran until her lungs burned, hiding behind rocks and fallen trees. Eventually, she found a small stream and followed it downhill, hoping it would lead to civilization. After hours of running and hiding, Emily stumbled onto a rural road. A passing truck driver saw the bloody, terrified girl waving desperately and stopped. He immediately called 911. When the police arrived, Emily could barely speak her own name. Her rescue made national news. The man was arrested the next day after a massive manhunt. He had a history of similar crimes against young women. Emily's reunion with her family was filled with tears and relief. She had lost a lot of weight and was covered in scars, both visible and invisible. The physical healing took months, but the mental trauma lasted much longer. She suffered severe PTSD and had to take a break from college. However, Emily refused to let that monster win. Here's something that will make you think twice. A 19-year-old American college girl is driving home late at night after a long shift at work. Her car suddenly breaks down on a deserted highway. A helpful-looking stranger stops to assist her. What if that one moment of trust led to the most terrifying night of her life? Betrayal, violence, and a desperate fight to survive. How well do you really know a stranger? Stay with me until the end, because this nightmare is 100% real. Her name was Lauren Mitchell. In the summer of 2018, in Texas, Lauren was working late nights at a diner to pay for college. That particular night, she finished her shift around 2 a.m. and started driving back to her apartment. The highway was almost empty. Suddenly, her old Honda started making strange noises and stopped completely on the side of a dark, isolated stretch of road with no streetlights. Lauren felt scared but tried to stay calm. She called her roommate, but there was no signal. A few minutes later, a pickup truck slowed down and stopped behind her. A man in his late 30s got out, tall, wearing a baseball cap, and seeming genuinely concerned. He offered to help check her engine. Lauren hesitated but accepted because she felt she had no choice. He seemed polite and even showed her his mechanic's tools. Within minutes, everything changed. The man suddenly grabbed her from behind, covered her mouth, and dragged her toward his truck. Lauren fought hard, scratching and kicking, but he was much stronger. He tied her hands with zip ties, threw her in the back seat of his truck, and drove off, leaving her broken car behind. The man took her to a remote trailer deep in the woods, far from the highway. What followed was several hours of pure terror and sadistic violence. He raped her repeatedly. He beat her mercilessly, punching her face and body until she was covered in bruises. He used a belt to whip her and threatened to kill her if she screamed too loud. He told her he had done this before, and no one had ever found the girls. Lauren was in excruciating pain. She begged him to let her go, but he only laughed and said she now belonged to him. He tied her to a chair in the trailer and continued the torture throughout the night, burning her with cigarettes, cutting her arms, and humiliating her in every possible way. The psychological torment was equally brutal. He showed her photos of other girls he claimed to have killed. At one point, while he was drinking and getting more aggressive, Lauren saw a small opportunity. Using a piece of broken glass from a bottle he had smashed earlier, she slowly cut through the ropes on her wrists. Her hands were shaking and bleeding, but she kept going. When the man came back to assault her again, Lauren surprised him. She stabbed him in the shoulder with the glass shard and ran out of the trailer into the dark woods. She was barefoot, wearing only torn clothes, covered in blood, and running for her life. The man chased her, shouting and firing a gunshot into the air. Lauren ran blindly through the trees, branches cutting her skin. She could hear him getting closer. In a moment of pure desperation, she hid behind a fallen log and stayed completely silent. The man passed by her, still searching. After what felt like forever, she heard his truck engine start in the distance as he gave up and drove away. Lauren kept walking through the woods until sunrise. Finally, she reached a small gas station on the outskirts. The staff there were shocked when they saw her condition. They called the police immediately. Lauren was able to give a description of the man and his truck. The attacker was arrested 2 days later. It turned out he was a known predator with a long criminal record. Lauren's case helped connect him to several other unsolved attacks on young women. Lauren spent weeks in the hospital recovering from her injuries. The physical scars healed, but the mental trauma was deep. She suffered from severe anxiety, nightmares, and trust issues for years. However, she refused to let that night define her. She completed college, became a counselor helping other survivors of sexual violence, and started a self-defense program for women. Think about this. A 17-year-old American girl is babysitting at a quiet suburban house on a Friday night. The parents leave, the kids fall asleep, and everything feels normal. Then she hears a noise at the back door. What if that peaceful night turned into one of the most horrifying home invasions imaginable? Hours of terror, pain, and a fight for survival. How far would you go to stay alive? Stay until the end, because this disturbing true story actually happened to a young girl in America. Her name was Ashley Peterson. On a cool Friday evening in October 2015, in a peaceful neighborhood in Ohio, Ashley took a babysitting job for a family she knew from church. The parents were going out for a date night and left her with their 2 young children, who went to sleep early. Ashley locked all the doors, turned on the TV at low volume, and felt completely safe in the comfortable suburban home. Around 11:30 p.m., she heard a faint noise coming from the back door. She thought it might be the wind or an animal. When she went to check, the glass on the back door suddenly shattered. 3 masked men burst into the house. Ashley screamed, but one of them quickly grabbed her and pressed a knife to her throat. "Shut up or we'll kill the kids," he hissed. The nightmare began instantly. The men tied Ashley's hands and dragged her into the living room. They ransacked the house looking for money and valuables, but when they found very little, their frustration turned into pure rage and cruelty. They started beating Ashley brutally, punching her, kicking her, and slamming her against the walls. She begged them to stop, but they only laughed. What followed was several hours of unimaginable horror. The men took turns assaulting and torturing her. They used knives to cut her arms and legs, burned her with lighters they found in the kitchen, and did things so sadistic that Ashley still cannot speak about some of them. They forced her to stay silent by threatening to hurt the sleeping children upstairs. Ashley endured the pain while praying the kids wouldn't wake up and see what was happening. The attackers humiliated her, mocked her tears, and filmed parts of the assault on their phones. They kept saying she was just entertainment for the night. Ashley's body was covered in blood and bruises. She felt her strength fading and thought she might die in that living room. In a moment of desperate courage, while 2 of the men were upstairs searching for more things, Ashley managed to loosen the ropes on her wrists using a piece of broken glass on the floor. Her hands were slippery with blood, but she kept trying. When one man came back downstairs, she surprised him by smashing a heavy lamp on his head. Chaos erupted. Ashley screamed at the top of her lungs, hoping neighbors would hear. She fought like a wild animal, kicking and scratching. The noise finally woke the neighbors, who called the police. The 3 men panicked and fled through the back door, but not before giving Ashley one final brutal beating. When the police arrived, they found Ashley lying in a pool of her own blood, barely conscious. The children upstairs were unharmed, but terrified by the screams. Ashley was rushed to the hospital with multiple fractures, deep cuts, burns, and severe trauma. The men were caught a few days later after the videos they took were traced. The trial was extremely difficult for Ashley. She had to relive every horrifying moment in court. All 3 received long prison sentences. Ashley's recovery was long and painful. She spent weeks in the hospital. Physical scars healed slowly, but the mental scars ran much deeper. She suffered from severe PTSD, nightmares, and panic attacks for years. Simple things like the sound of breaking glass or being home alone triggered intense fear. Despite everything, Ashley refused to let those monsters destroy her life. She completed her studies, became a strong advocate for victims of violent crime, and started speaking publicly about home safety and self-defense for young women. She also worked with a family whose children she was babysitting. They remained close and supportive. This true American horror story shows how quickly a normal night can turn into pure evil. A quiet suburban home became a place of unimaginable terror. But it also proves the incredible strength of a young girl who fought back even when the odds were against her. If you relate with this horror story, then like this video. Comment where you are watching my videos and subscribe to my channel for more horror stories. Picture this. A 21-year-old American girl is jogging on her usual evening route near the woods in a quiet town. The sun is setting, her favorite music is playing, and she feels completely safe. Then suddenly a car stops beside her. 2 men jump out and drag her away. What if that normal evening run turned into 3 years of absolute hell? Torture, starvation, and unimaginable cruelty. How does one girl survive such pure evil? Stay with me until the very end because this shocking true story really happened. Her name was Sophia Thompson. On a warm evening in May 2014, in rural Michigan, her ordinary life was violently stolen. Sophia was a college student who loved running in the evenings to clear her head. That day the weather was perfect, golden sunlight filtering through the trees, fresh air, and her playlist motivating her steps. She had no idea that a black SUV had been following her for days. The 2 men inside were brothers with violent histories. They pulled up fast. One grabbed Sophia from behind while the other pointed a gun at her. She fought desperately, kicking and screaming, but they were too strong. They taped her mouth, tied her hands, and threw her into the back of the SUV. The vehicle sped off into the deep woods. They took her to an isolated old farmhouse far from any main roads. It had a hidden, soundproof basement that became her prison. From the very first night, the nightmare began without mercy. The brothers beat her severely to break her will. She was stripped, chained to a metal pole in the cold basement, and left in complete darkness. The next 3 years were filled with relentless horror. They starved her for days at a time. They burned her with cigarettes, cut her with knives, and tortured her body in cruel, sadistic ways. They took turns raping her almost daily. They laughed at her screams and forced her to thank them after every beating. If she cried too loudly or resisted, the punishment became even more brutal. Sophia spent most of her time chained in that dark basement like an animal. Sometimes they brought her upstairs in chains and made her cook and clean for them. Her body slowly became covered in scars. She was skin and bones from constant malnutrition. She kept track of time by scratching tiny marks on the concrete wall with her fingernails until they bled. 1 year passed. Then 2. The isolation and pain were crushing. The brothers constantly tormented her mind. They told her that her family had given up searching, that no one cared about her anymore, and that she now belonged to them forever. They made her watch old news clips of her own disappearance and laughed while she cried. The psychological torture was as devastating as the physical pain. Despite everything, a small spark of determination remained inside Sophia. She whispered her family's names every night to keep her identity alive. She studied the brothers' routines and waited patiently for any small opportunity. By the 3rd year, the men had grown slightly careless. One freezing winter night in 2017, after drinking heavily, both brothers passed out upstairs. Sophia saw her only chance. With trembling hands, she managed to loosen her chains using a hidden piece of metal she had sharpened over months. She quietly took the keys, unlocked the door, and ran into the freezing snow wearing almost nothing. She ran barefoot through the dark woods, branches cutting her skin, her lungs burning. One of the brothers woke up and started chasing her, shouting threats. But Sophia kept running with every last bit of strength she had. She finally reached a main road where a truck driver saw her desperate waving and stopped. When she told him her name, the driver was stunned. Sophia Thompson had been missing for almost 3 years. The police were called immediately. Both brothers were arrested that same night. The reunion with her family was incredibly emotional. Her mother held her tightly and cried for hours. Sophia was severely scarred, traumatized, and almost unrecognizable. The road to recovery was long. Multiple surgeries, years of therapy, and constant support from her loved ones. Even today, dark basements, sudden loud noises, or the smell of smoke trigger terrifying flashbacks. This true American horror story reveals how evil can hide in quiet rural areas. 2 seemingly ordinary brothers turned a young girl's life into 3 years of pure hell just for their sick pleasure. Yet Sophia refused to break completely. She survived, rebuilt her life, and now works with survivor organizations to help other girls. Her story is a powerful reminder for every woman. Trust your instincts, stay aware of your surroundings, and never underestimate the strength inside you when facing darkness.